The alley reeked of rot and rain, a far cry from the jasmine-scented penthouses where I once held court. My fingers, once manicured for close-up shots that garnered millions of double taps, now trembled around the manila envelope. The paper was damp with sweat and drizzle, its contents burning through the thin barrier like acid through silk. 23 million followers. 23 million lies. I pressed myself against the brick wall, feeling its rough surface catch on the designer jacket I'd worn for 3 days straight. The streetlight at the alley's mouth flickered, casting shadows that danced like the notifications that once lit up my phone screen. Hearts, comments, adoration. All of it false as the Hermes bags I'd built an empire on. The document inside this envelope would end everything. My sister's handwriting stared back at me through the transparent window for immediate release. Even now, even after everything, she dotted her eyes with perfect circles, just like when we were children sharing a bedroom in our parents' cramped apartment. Before I became Madison Rose. Before I forgot that my real name was Mary Beth Johnson. A siren wailed in the distance, and I flinched. Every sound could be them coming for me. The FBI. The brands. The mob of followers who'd already begun gathering outside my Tribeca loft, their love curdling into rage as quickly as milk in the sun. I slid down the wall until I was crouching in the filth, my designer heels sinking into something I didn't want to identify. The pills in my pocket rattled like dice in a cup, promising escape, promising nothing. I'd taken 3 already, just to stop my hands from shaking long enough to read what my sister had compiled. Bank statements, factory photos, text messages sent in the depths of withdrawal, begging suppliers for just one more shipment, just one more fix. How many likes would this get? The thought came unbidden, a reflex as automatic as breathing. Even now, even in my destruction, I was calculating engagement rates. The laugh that escaped me was bitter as the Xanax dissolving under my tongue. She had laughed too, hadn't she? My sister, when I'd told her I was becoming a writer. You, she'd said, looking at my fresh lip fillers and rented Lamborghini. You can barely spell without autocorrect. But I had written something, hadn't I? Written an entire fiction of a life. Authored a persona so convincing that 23 million people had bought into it. And now she was writing the epilogue. I opened the envelope with numb fingers. The dedication page of her exposé stared back at me, formatted like a newspaper article, but personal as a suicide note. For Mary Beth, who taught me that the most beautiful masks hide the ugliest truths. And for the workers of Guangzhou Factory No. 7, whose hands bled so that others could pretend at luxury. The alley spun. Or maybe I was spinning. The pages scattered from my hands, catching in the wind like the algorithms that once favored me, now carrying my secrets to every corner of the digital world. Tomorrow, I would wake up deleted. Tonight, I was still verified. 6 months earlier, I had stood on the rooftop of the Soho Grand, champagne flute in one hand, phone in the other, live streaming my authentic morning routine to 12 million viewers. The sunrise painted Manhattan in shades of gold and rose, the perfect backdrop for the perfect life I'd curated pixel by pixel. Good morning, my loves. I'd cooed into the camera, my voice honeyed with practiced warmth. The comments flooded in faster than I could read them. Hearts, fire emojis, marriage proposals in 17 languages. Today's look is brought to you by. I'd paused, letting the anticipation build, knowing that engagement peaked in the seconds before a reveal. Actually, it's a secret. Can you guess the brand? They couldn't, of course. The Chanel logo had been carefully recreated by nimble fingers in a warehouse outside Guangzhou. Fingers that worked 18-hour days for less than I spent on a single matcha latte. But the stitching was impeccable, the leather butter soft, the hardware weighted just right. Even I sometimes forgot what was real and what wasn't. The pills helped with that. They helped with everything. I discovered them the way I discovered all my best-kept secrets, by accident, then by necessity. A photographer at a shoot had slipped me one when I'd complained about jet lag. Better than coffee, he'd promised, and he was right. Within 20 minutes, I was sharper, brighter, more myself than myself. The real Madison Rose was born in that moment, synthesized from amphetamines and ambition. Now, standing in that putrid alley, I could hardly remember the girl who'd taken that first pill. She existed in the space between posts, in the deleted takes and filtered failures. She was as counterfeit as everything else I'd touched. My phone buzzed. Even with notifications turned off, the vibration pattern was unmistakable, the rapid-fire assault of a post going viral. I didn't need to look to know what was happening. Katie Lynn, my sister, still insisted on using her real name, as if authenticity was a luxury she could afford, had posted the first revelation. The warehouse photos would be live now. Row upon row of sewing machines, women bent over leather and canvas, recreating luxury for pennies on the dollar. She'd been smart, had blurred their faces but left enough detail to make the conditions clear. The single bathroom for 200 workers. The windows painted black to hide the operation. The children, the children, sleeping under cutting tables while their mothers worked through the night. I had visited once, early in the operation when I still believed I was building something revolutionary. Affordable luxury for all. I'd captioned a business plan I'd never shown anyone. But standing in that warehouse, watching a woman twice my age squint over the Gucci double G that would later grace my Instagram feed, I'd understood what I was really building. An empire of exploitation, each brick mortared with someone else's exhaustion. The pills had helped with the guilt too. Amazing how much they helped with. My phone rang. Tyler, my manager. My former manager, probably, though he didn't know it yet. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his panicked message. Madison, what the fuck is this? Is this real? Call me back. Don't post anything. Don't Christ. TMZ just picked it up. Call me. TMZ. The modern guillotine, where reputations win a die in real time. I could picture the headline already. Influencer's fake empire exposed by sister. They'd use my least flattering photo, the one from the Met Gala where I'd been caught mid-blink, looking hollow-eyed and hunted. Prophetic, really. I forced myself to stand, to move. The alley opened onto Prince Street, where the Saturday night crowd was just beginning to thin. A group of girls in their early 20s passed, one of them wearing a bag I recognized, not because it was real, but because I'd posted it 3 weeks ago. The Celine stamp was slightly off-center, the way they always were from factory number 7. She clutched it like a talisman, like I once had. Oh my God, one of her friends gasped, phone glowing in her hand. Did you see? Madison Rose is canceled. Like, canceled. What did she do? Everything. Fake bags, drugs, she's been lying about. Holy shit, is that her? I pulled my hood up, but it was too late. The recognition spread across their faces like wildfire, fascination mixed with disgust. The girl with the fake bag, my fake bag, took a step back as if I were contagious. You're a fraud, she whispered, and the word hit harder than any scream could have. I ran. The Tribeca loft had been my sanctuary, 5,000 square feet of floor-to-ceiling windows and imported marble. Now it felt like a fishbowl, every angle exposed to the gathering crowd below. They'd found me within hours, the digital breadcrumbs I'd scattered so carefully over the years leading them straight to my door. I watched them from behind the curtains, my curtains, I reminded myself, at least until the lease was up. They held signs, fake influencer, real damage. Where's our money, Madison? Some were crying. These were the ones that hurt most, the true believers who'd bought into the dream I was selling. One girl, she couldn't have been more than 16, clutched a printout of a post where I'd talked about female empowerment, about building your own empire. I built mine on your backs, I thought, and the Xanax couldn't quite dull the edge of that truth. My laptop sat open on the kitchen island, the screen a mosaic of destruction. Katie Lynn's Medium post had been shared 17,000 times in 3 hours. The warehouse photos were damning enough, but she'd been thorough in a way only a sister could be. Screenshots of text conversations where I'd begged my suppliers for stronger pills, faster delivery. Banking records showing the money flow, from fake bag sales to drug dealers to more fake bags, Ouroboros of addiction and deception. But it was the personal details that cut deepest. The childhood photos she'd included, showing us in matching hand-me-down dresses, our parents' restaurant in the background. Before she was Madison Rose, she was Mary Beth Johnson. The caption read, daughter of a mechanic and a waitress who worked 18-hour days so she could have a better life. This is how she repaid them. Our parents. I hadn't spoken to them in 2 years, not since I'd legally changed my name. They'd been confused, hurt. Johnson is a good name, my mother had said, her accent thick with disappointment. Your granddaddy carried it with pride. It's not marketable, I'd replied, and watched something die in her eyes. Now their little diner would be overrun with reporters, their quiet life shattered by their daughter's public demolition. Katie Lynn had been careful not to name them directly, but the internet was nothing if not resourceful. By morning, someone would have connected the dots. My phone vibrated against the marble countertop. A number I didn't recognize, but the area code was familiar, 213, Los Angeles. I answered without thinking, my dealer's reflex still sharp despite the chaos. Madison Rose? The voice was male, professional, predatory. This is Dean Martinez from Netflix. We're interested in acquiring the rights to your story. The rise and fall angle is incredibly compelling, and with your sister's involvement. I hung up, watched the phone immediately light up again. Different number, same area code. Then another, and another. The vultures were circling, ready to feast on my carcass while it was still warm. This is what viral feels like from the inside, I thought. Like being eaten alive, one pixel at a time. The pills in my pocket were down to 7. I'd counted them obsessively since leaving the alley, a rosary of chemical comfort. My supplier, former supplier, since he'd gone dark the moment the news broke, had always been reliable. But reliability was a luxury I could no longer afford, like the real designer goods I'd once mixed in with the fakes to maintain the illusion. A memory surfaced, sharp despite the pharmaceutical haze. Katie Lynn and I, 12 and 14, working in our parents' diner after school. She'd been better at it than me, naturally warm where I was performatively charming. A customer had left a designer wallet behind, buttery leather and gleaming hardware. I'd held it reverently, memorizing every detail. We have to return it, Katie Lynn had said, already reaching for the phone. What if we just looked inside first? I'd suggested. Just to see. She'd stared at me like I'd suggested murder. That's stealing, Mary Beth. It's not stealing if we give it back. But I'd seen how she looked at me after that, like she was cataloging all the ways I might disappoint her. 20 years later, she'd finally published the list. The doorbell rang, sharp and sudden. Then again, and again. Someone was leaning on it, the sound drilling into my skull like Judgment Day. Ms. Rose? NYPD. We need to speak with you. Already? The walls seemed to contract, the loft shrinking to the size of that alley, that moment of recognition, that first pill. I'd known this was coming, had known it from the moment I'd sold that first fake bag, claiming it was an authentic piece from my personal collection. But knowing and experiencing were different creatures entirely. Ms. Rose? We know you're in there. Your doorman confirmed it. Fucking Jimmy. I tipped him generously every Christmas, $100 bills folded into cards about appreciating the little people. He'd smiled and nodded and sold me out the moment things went south. The transactional nature of every relationship in my life had never been clearer. I moved to the door on legs that felt disconnected from my body. The peephole showed 2 detectives, badges visible, faces carefully neutral. Behind them, the hallway camera blinked red. Recording. Everything was always recording. I need to call my lawyer, I said through the door, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. That's your right, ma'am. But we'd appreciate if you'd open the door. We're not here to arrest you. Yet. Such a small word to carry such weight. I opened the door. The precinct smelled like burnt coffee and industrial disinfectant, a combination that made my empty stomach churn. They'd been polite, professional even, as they led me past the crowd outside my building. Someone had thrown an egg. It had splattered against the detective's shoulder, yolk running down his cheap suit like designer imposter syndrome. For the record, Detective Anderson said, settling across from me in the interview room, "You're not under arrest. You're free to leave at any time. But you'd prefer I didn't." She smiled, the kind of smile that had probably cracked 1,000 suspects. "We'd appreciate your cooperation. Your sister's accusations are serious. Workers' rights violations, drug trafficking, fraud." Alleged, I interrupted, the word automatic. I'd learned it from reality TV, where every scandal was alleged until the receipts came out. Except Katie Lynn had all the receipts. She'd been collecting them for years, I realized now. Every time she'd visited, every family dinner I'd grudgingly attended, she'd been building her case. Right. Alleged. Anderson opened a folder, photographs spilling across the table like tarot cards predicting my future. The warehouse. The workers. The pills. My pills in branded bottles with fake prescriptions. Want to tell me about these? I stared at the images, seeing them the way the jury would. The prosecution would paint me as a monster, a narcissist who'd exploited everyone in her orbit for fame and fortune. The defense, if I could afford one after my accounts were frozen, would try to humanize me. Addiction is a disease, they'd say. She's a victim too. Both versions were true. Neither was complete. I want to tell you about my sister, I said instead, surprising myself. Anderson's eyebrow arched, but she nodded for me to continue. Katie Lynn was always the good one. Straight A's, full scholarship to Clemson, never missed Sunday dinner with our parents. She used to edit my papers in high school, fix all my grammatical disasters. I told her once that I wanted to be a writer, and she laughed. Not mean, just knowing. You can't even spell, she said. But you can tell a story. Maybe you should be an actress instead. I picked up one of the photos, a wide shot of the warehouse floor. I became both. Wrote my character and performed her until I couldn't tell where the performance ended. Madison Rose was my greatest creation. She was everything Mary Beth Johnson wasn't: confident, successful, beloved. She was also, I gestured at the photos, a complete fabrication. Your sister seems to think this goes deeper than performance art, Anderson said. She provided evidence of financial crimes going back 5 years. 5 years. Had it really been that long? Time moved differently in the influence economy, measured in posts and stories rather than calendar pages. 5 years ago, I'd been sleeping on Katie Lynn's couch, detoxing from my first bout with pills, swearing I'd get clean, get honest, get real. I need protection, I said suddenly. Witness protection, or whatever you call it. I'll testify. Tell you everything. Names, numbers, how the whole operation worked. But I need protection from who? Ms. Rose? From everyone. From the suppliers who'd want me silent. From the workers who'd want justice. From the followers who'd want blood. From myself, most of all. There's a man, I began, then stopped. Detective Anderson leaned forward, sensing weakness. His name is Chin. David Chin. He runs the factories. I was just the face, the marketing. He's the one who what? But I couldn't finish. Because David Chin was a fiction too, a name I'd invented to distance myself from the decisions I'd made. There was no shadowy figure pulling the strings. There was just me, Mary Beth turned Madison, building an empire on other people's suffering because I couldn't bear my own. The room spun. Or maybe I was spinning again. The fluorescent lights above fractured into prismatic halos, beautiful and blinding. Ms. Rose? Madison? I heard my name, both versions, from very far away. The pills in my pocket had dwindled to 4, and I'd taken 2 in the bathroom before the interview. Not enough to escape, just enough to endure. I need a doctor, I managed, the words thick and foreign. I think. The floor rose to meet me, or I fell to meet it. Either way, the impact was softer than I'd expected, like landing on all those lies I'd piled up over the years. Somewhere, sirens wailed. Somewhere, my phone buzzed with notifications I'd never read. Somewhere, my sister was probably writing the next chapter of my downfall. But here, now, there was only the darkness, and it was almost kind. 6 months. That's how long it took for the case to come to trial. 6 months of house arrest in a studio apartment in Queens, my Tribeca loft long since seized by the authorities. 6 months of watching my follower count plummet from 23 million to 12 million to 3 million to none. Instagram had finally deleted my account for violating community guidelines. A digital death sentence delivered with algorithmic indifference. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled with former followers, journalists, and curiosity seekers. I recognized some faces, girls who'd bought my designer bags, women who'd believed my motivational posts about female entrepreneurship. They looked at me now like I was a creature in a zoo, something to be studied and pitted and despised in equal measure. Katie Lynn sat in the front row, our parents flanking her. She convinced them to come, though Mama couldn't meet my eyes and Daddy seemed to have aged a decade in 6 months. Their diner had survived the scandal, barely. Katie Lynn had started a GoFundMe that raised enough to cover the losses from canceled reservations and broken windows. The Johnsons are victims too, she'd written in the campaign description. Don't punish them for their daughter's crimes. Their daughter. Singular. As if they'd only ever had one. The prosecutor was everything I'd once pretended to be: polished, articulate, commanding. ADA Jennifer Thompson wore her success like armor, her genuine Armani suit a rebuke to every knockoff I'd ever peddled. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she began, her voice carrying the kind of authority that couldn't be faked. The defendant wants you to believe she's a victim. She'll tell you about her addiction, her troubled childhood, her struggles with authenticity in the digital age. But I'm here to show you the real victims, the 200 women working in conditions that violate every labor law we have, the thousands of consumers who were deliberately defrauded, the families torn apart by drug addiction fueled by pills the defendant distributed. My lawyer, court-appointed, since I couldn't afford the retainer for anyone better, shifted beside me. Bobby Patterson was 73, semi-retired, and had taken my case because, I knew your granddaddy. He'd want someone looking out for you, even now. Objection, Bobby said, his voice reedy but determined. Prosecution is making arguments, not an opening statement. Sustained, Judge Williams said, though her expression suggested she agreed with every word Thompson had spoken. The first day was a blur of procedures and testimonies. Thompson had been thorough, building her case brick by damning brick. Financial experts testified about the money laundering. DEA agents detailed the pill distribution network. But it was the warehouse workers who destroyed me. Li Wei took the stand with a translator, though her English was probably better than mine. She was 43, a mother of 2, and had worked in factory number 7 for 3 years. Can you describe the working conditions? Thompson asked. Li Wei's voice was steady, matter-of-fact. She described 18-hour shifts, bathroom breaks timed and limited, children sleeping in the storage areas because their mothers couldn't afford childcare, fingers bleeding from endless stitching, women fainting from exhaustion and being docked pay for the time they were unconscious. Did you know who you were making these bags for? Thompson continued. Yes. Li Wei looked directly at me for the first time. Madison Rose, the beautiful American girl who talked about empowering women. We watched her videos sometimes, during our 5-minute lunch breaks. She seemed so happy. We thought maybe if we worked hard enough, we could be happy too. I wanted to disappear, to dissolve into the defendant's chair like a pill under the tongue. But there was nowhere to hide from Li Wei's steady gaze, from the truth she laid out in simple, devastating sentences. She knew, Li Wei said, switching to English for emphasis. She came once, saw us, took pictures, said we were part of her family. Then she left. Conditions got worse. But her posts got more popular. Bobby's cross-examination was gentle, focusing on the fact that I hadn't directly managed the factory, that I was just one part of a larger operation. But the damage was done. The jury looked at me differently now, seeing past the carefully applied courtroom makeup to the corruption underneath. That night, in my Queen studio, I stared at the ceiling and thought about transformation. I'd transformed myself from Mary Beth to Madison, from nobody to somebody to nobody again. But watching Li Wei testify, I'd seen a different kind of transformation, the kind that came from truth, not performance. My phone, a basic model, since my iPhone had been confiscated as evidence, buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You're going to lose, it read. But that doesn't mean it has to end. No signature, but I recognized the area code. Katie Lynn's new number. Even now, even after everything, she was reaching out. Not with forgiveness. I didn't deserve that. But with something more precious. The possibility of after. The trial lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of evidence so damning that even I was convinced of my guilt. Thompson had done her job with surgical precision, each witness another cut in the carefully maintained facade of Madison Rose. The drug dealers testified with immunity, describing how I'd started as a customer and quickly became a distributor, using my influence to move pills to aspiring influencers who wanted what I had. The fashion industry experts explained the scope of the counterfeit operation, how my reviews of fake bags had legitimized an entire underground economy. The financial forensics team traced every dollar, from fake bag sales to offshore accounts to pharmaceutical suppliers. But it was Katie Lynn's testimony that finished me. She took the stand on day 12, wearing our grandmother's necklace, the only real jewelry our family owned. I hadn't seen her in 6 months, and the change was striking. She'd lost weight, gained gravitas. Where I'd always been the performer, she'd become the truth-teller. Can you describe your relationship with the defendant? Thompson asked. She's my sister, Katie Lynn said simply. I love her. I've always loved her. But love doesn't mean enabling destruction. She told the court about finding me overdosed in my Tribeca bathroom, foam on my lips and followers still heart-reacting to my latest post. About the interventions our parents had attempted, the rehab stints I'd documented as wellness retreats. About the moment she'd decided to go public, when she'd found out about the warehouse, about Li Wei and the others. I found a photo on her phone, Katie Lynn said, her voice steady despite the tears tracking down her cheeks. She'd taken it during her factory visit. A girl, maybe 13, asleep under a sewing machine, still holding a needle. Mary Beth had captioned it dedication with a heart emoji. She never posted it, but she kept it. Like a trophy. I remembered that photo. Remembered taking it, thinking it showed initiative, work ethic, The hustle I always preached. Now, through Katie Lynn's eyes, through the jury's eyes, I saw what it really was, a child laborer, exhausted past the point of humanity, creating luxury for people who'd never know her name. Why did you decide to expose your sister? Thompson asked. Katie Lynn looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw not anger but grief. Because sometimes the only way to save someone is to let them fall. And because those women, those girls, they deserve someone to speak for them. Mary Beth taught me that stories have power. So I decided to tell the truth. Bobby's cross-examination was perfunctory. What could he ask? Whether she loved me. She'd already said she did. Whether she had regrets. Her tears were answer enough. The defense's case was brief. A psychologist testified about addiction as a disease. A social media expert discussed the pressures of influence culture. Bobby argued that I was a symptom of a sick system, not the disease itself. All true. All irrelevant. I took the stand on the final day, against Bobby's advice. I built a lie and called it a life, I said, looking at the jury, at my family, at the cameras broadcasting my downfall to whatever audience remained. I told myself I was empowering women while I exploited them. I preached authenticity while living a complete fabrication. I got addicted to pills, but I was already addicted to something worse, the validation of strangers, the currency of likes, the drug of being seen as someone I never was. I talked about the first fake bag I'd sold, how easy it had been to convince someone that counterfeit leather was real when they wanted so badly to believe. How that small lie had metastasized into an entire false existence. My sister laughed when I said I wanted to be a writer. I continued, finding Katie Lynn's face in the gallery. She was right to laugh. I couldn't spell, could barely string a sentence together. But I wrote anyway. I wrote Madison Rose into existence, crafted her from aspirational hashtags and stolen aesthetics. She was my greatest work of fiction. And like all fiction, she wasn't meant to be lived. The prosecutor's closing argument was damning. Bobby's was dignified but futile. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. As the verdict was read, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, relief. The performance was over. The show had been canceled. Mary Beth Johnson could finally stop pretending to be Madison Rose. Judge Williams's voice seemed to come from very far away as she delivered the sentence. 10 years. Restitution to the victims. Forfeiture of all assets derived from criminal enterprise. 10 years. I'd built and destroyed an empire in less time than I'd spent paying for it. As the bailiffs approached with handcuffs, I turned to look at my family one last time. Daddy had his arm around Mama, who was sobbing silently into his shoulder. And Katie Lynn was writing in a small notebook, already crafting the next chapter of this story. She looked up, caught my eye, and did something unexpected. She smiled. Not with happiness, not with satisfaction, but with something I'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. The handcuffs were cold against my wrists, real in a way nothing in my life had been for years. As they led me away, I thought about Li Wei and the others, hoping the restitution would find its way to them. I thought about my parents, hoping their diner would survive this final embarrassment. I thought about Katie Lynn, hoping she'd find a way to forgive me. But mostly, I thought about the 13-year-old girl asleep under the sewing machine, and I hoped she'd found a better dream than mine. 5 years later, I stood in front of a room full of women, my hands steady on the podium, my voice clear without pharmaceutical assistance. The community center in Anderson County was a far cry from the Soho Grand rooftop, but the sunrise through the windows was just as beautiful. More beautiful, maybe, because I could actually see it. My name is Mary Beth, I began, the way I always began these meetings. And I'm an addict. Hi, Mary Beth, they chorused back, these women who'd found their way to our program through various channels of desperation and hope. The Authentic Life Foundation was small, unglamorous, and absolutely real. We provided job training for women leaving exploitative labor situations, many of them former workers in counterfeit operations like the one I'd helped run. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, the fake influencer teaching courses on authentic living. But irony, I learned, could be instructive. After the meeting, Emma May approached me. She was new, still skittish, her English limited but improving. She'd worked in a knockoff factory in Spartanburg, stitching fake designer labels onto real suffering. Ms. Mary Beth, she said, I have a question about the homework. The homework was simple. Write one true thing about yourself every day. Not a caption, not a brand, just a truth. Most of them struggled with it. I understood why. What's your question? How do you know if something is true? When you pretend so long, how do you remember what's real? I thought about Madison Rose, that carefully constructed ghost who still haunted my Google results. Thought about the pills I'd once needed to maintain her existence. Thought about the dedication page Katie Lynn had written, which I kept folded in my wallet like a talisman. You start small, I told MMA. One true sentence at a time. Like laying bricks. Eventually, you build something real. After she left, I sat in my small office, donated space in the community center basement, and opened my laptop. The screen showed our latest financial report. We were operating on a shoestring budget, mostly small donations and whatever I could contribute from the meager salary I earned at the diner. Yes, I was back to waiting tables. My parents had hired me after my early release for good behavior, though it had taken months to convince them I could be trusted with the cash register. The work was hard, honest, unglamorous, everything Madison Rose would have despised. Mary Beth Johnson found it grounding. But there was something else in the financial report, a line item I'd been hiding for 3 years. Anonymous donations, substantial ones, that arrived monthly like clockwork. I told the board they were from a concerned benefactor who wished to remain private. Only I knew the truth. The money came from the sale of my story. Not the Netflix deal. I turned that down, along with every other offer to commercialize my downfall. But I had sold something, quietly, through intermediaries and shell companies as tangled as my criminal enterprise had been. I'd sold the one thing of value Madison Rose had actually created, her influence. Before my accounts were deleted, before the FBI seized my assets, I transferred ownership of something intangible but valuable, the algorithms I'd gamed, the engagement strategies I'd perfected, the dark art of viral deception. Tech companies paid well for such insights, especially when packaged as what not to do. Every month, their payments arrived, laundered through legitimate channels into the Foundation's accounts. It was, I recognized, another kind of fraud. Taking money derived from teaching others how to deceive, using it to fund redemption. Katie Lynn would have a field day if she knew. But she didn't know. No one did. This was my secret to carry, my private penance. My phone buzzed. Katie Lynn, texting about Sunday dinner. We were slowly rebuilding, one meal at a time. She'd published a book about the whole ordeal, unfiltered, a sister's search for truth in the age of influence. It was a bestseller. She'd offered to share the proceeds. I declined. Can't make it this week, I typed back. Leading a workshop on interview skills. Next Sunday, she confirmed. Then, after a pause, 3 dots appearing and disappearing as she typed and deleted. Proud of you. 2 words. They hit harder than any verdict. I closed the laptop and prepared for the workshop. 15 women would arrive soon, all of them carrying resumes we'd helped them write, all of them trying to build lives on foundations of truth rather than performance. I teach them about eye contact and firm handshakes, about selling their authentic selves rather than manufactured personas. And if they succeeded, when they succeeded, it would be real. Unlike everything I'd built as Madison Rose, this couldn't be deleted or seized or exposed as fraudulent. It was as authentic as the exhaustion in Lee Wei's testimony, as true as my sister's tears on the witness stand. But still, late at night, when I looked at the Foundation's bank balance, I knew the truth that I'd never speak aloud. Even my redemption was built on lies. The charity meant to help those I'd exploited was funded by the very system that had enabled their exploitation. The snake was eating its tail, but somehow, impossibly, it was sustaining life. I thought again of that dedication page Katie Lynn had written, for Mary Beth, who taught me that the most beautiful masks hide the ugliest truths. She'd been wrong about one thing, though. The ugliest truth wasn't hidden beneath the mask. The ugliest truth was that sometimes the mask becomes so integral to your survival that removing it feels like dying. And sometimes you have to die digitally, socially, spiritually to finally live. The women arrived for the workshop, filing in with the cautious hope of those who'd been disappointed too many times. I recognized myself in their faces, in their careful postures and guarded smiles. They'd all worn masks of their own, played roles they hadn't chosen, performed survival in whatever way they could. Today, I told them, standing before the whiteboard where I'd written 3 words: truth, voice, value. We're going to practice being ourselves. Not who we think employers want us to be. Not who we were forced to be. Just ourselves. One woman raised her hand. Betty Sue, who'd spent 5 years in a factory identical to the one I'd used. But what if ourselves isn't enough? I thought of all the selves I'd been. Mary Beth the disappointment, Madison the success, prisoner 47829, and now this, Mary Beth the penitent, still performing redemption with money earned from corruption. Then we work with what we have, I said. We build from where we are. We tell the truth about our past and our hopes for the future. We don't pretend to be perfect. We just try to be real. The workshop continued, role-playing and resume reviews, small victories and smaller steps forward. When it ended, the women dispersed back into the city, carrying their fragile hopes like the fake designer bags they used to stitch, except these dreams, however modest, were authentic. I stayed behind to clean up, stacking chairs and erasing the whiteboard. The sunset painted the room in shades of gold and shadow, and for a moment, I was tempted to take a photo. The old instinct died hard to capture, curate, share. But I resisted. Some moments weren't meant to be content. My phone buzzed. A notification from my parole officer, confirming next week's check-in. Another from the diner, asking if I could cover a shift. A third from an unknown number, probably another journalist wanting to rehash the scandal for Where Are They Now piece. I ignored them all and walked to the window, looking out at Anderson County as the day died. Somewhere out there, girls were still scrolling through feeds, believing in manufactured dreams. Somewhere, women were still bent over sewing machines, creating luxury from desperation. Somewhere, my digital ghost still haunted the internet, a cautionary tale told in think pieces and YouTube documentaries. But here, now, I was just Mary Beth Johnson, 32 years old, 5 years sober, standing in a borrowed room and trying to build something true from the rubble of something false. The door opened behind me. Emma May, returning with a shy smile and a piece of paper. "I did the homework," she said, handing it to me. One true thing. I read her careful handwriting. My hands know how to make beautiful things. Now I want them to make honest things. "That's perfect," I told her, and meant it. She left, and I locked up the community center, setting the alarm with the code I'd memorized, the date of my arrest, because I believed in remembering where you came from. The drive to my apartment in Valhalla took 20 minutes, time I used to spend obsessing over engagement metrics and planning content calendars. Now I used it to listen to the radio, local country stations, weather reports, the ordinary soundtrack of an authentic life. My apartment was small, sparse, real. No ring light, no backdrop, no carefully curated aesthetic. Just a bed, a desk, a chair, and a photo Katie Lynn had taken at last month's Sunday dinner, our whole family together for the first time in 3 years. We all looked older, worn by the scandal and its aftermath, but we were smiling. Not for cameras, not for content, just for the simple joy of survival. I sat at my desk and opened my journal, therapy homework that had become habit. Dr. Whitaker had suggested it during my first year in prison, right without an audience. See who you are when no one's watching. Tonight's entry began the way they all did. My name is Mary Beth, and today I told the truth about. But I stopped, pen hovering over paper. Because the truth was, I hadn't told the whole truth. Not to the workshop women, not to my family, not even to this journal. The Foundation's funding source remained my secret, a final fiction in my supposedly authentic life. I could rationalize it. The money was helping people, making amends, building something good from something rotten. But I knew what it really was, proof that even in redemption, I was still performing, still managing perception, still hiding the ugly truth behind a beautiful mask. The pen moved across paper, words flowing like the confessions I'd never made. My name is Mary Beth, and today I told the truth about everything except the money. The workshops, the jobs we've helped women find, the lives we've changed, all of it is real. But it's funded by a lie. I sold my knowledge of how to deceive to companies that wanted to prevent deception, and I used their payments to help the people that deception hurts. It's a circle that makes no sense in perfect sense. It's the kind of story Madison Rose would have spun into inspirational content, how I turned my mistakes into someone else's miracle. But Mary Beth Johnson just calls it what it is, complicated. Messy. Human. I tell myself I'll come clean eventually. When the foundation is stable. When the women don't need us anymore. When my family has fully healed. But these are lies too, pretty ones I dress up as pragmatism. The truth is, I'm afraid. Afraid that if people knew the money came from teaching others how to manipulate, they'd reject the help. Afraid that Katie Lynn would see it as another betrayal. Afraid that I'm still, after everything, the same Mary Beth who held that stranger's wallet and wondered what was inside. But maybe that's the realest truth of all, that redemption isn't a destination you arrive at, clean and pure and photogenic. It's a daily practice, like sobriety, like honesty, like learning to live without the validation of strangers. Some days I succeed. Some days I fail. Most days, like today, I do both. Tomorrow I'll wake up and go to the diner, where I'll serve grits and eggs to people who don't recognize me anymore. I'll attend my NA meeting, where I'll share my truth in careful doses. I'll come back to the community center, where I'll help women write resumes that don't lie about their experience but don't apologize for it either. And I'll carry this secret, this last performance, until I find the courage to end it. Or maybe I won't. Maybe some masks become part of your face, and removing them would cause more damage than leaving them on. Maybe the best we can do is acknowledge them, live with them, try to ensure they help more than they harm. My name is Mary Beth, and today I told the truth about lying about the truth. It's progress. It's not enough. It's what I have. And for now, that has to be enough. I closed the journal and prepared for bed, the same routine I'd followed for 5 years. No scrolling, no posting, no performing nighttime skincare routines for an audience that no longer existed. Just Mary Beth Johnson, washing her face and brushing her teeth and climbing into bed alone. But as I lay in the dark, I thought about MMA's homework, about hands that knew how to make beautiful things wanting to make honest things instead. Maybe that was all any of us could do, take the skills we learned in service of deception and slowly, carefully, turn them toward truth. My phone, charging on the nightstand, lit up with one final notification. A Google alert I'd never disabled, tracking mentions of Madison Rose. Someone had posted about me on TikTok, a retrospective on influencers who fell from grace. I didn't watch it. Didn't need to. That story had already been told. But there was another story still being written. The story of Mary Beth Johnson and the women at the community center. The story of second chances built on shaky foundations. The story of my family's slow healing. The story of redemption funded by the very systems it sought to dismantle. It wasn't the kind of story that would go viral. No shocking revelations, no dramatic downfalls, no perfect endings. Just the daily work of living with what you'd done and trying to do better. The algorithms wouldn't favor it. The audience wouldn't engage. But it was real. Mostly real. Real enough. And in the economy of truth, where authenticity was the only currency that couldn't be counterfeited, real enough was its own kind of wealth. I fell asleep thinking of dedication pages, the one Katie Lynn had written exposing me, and the one I might someday write if I ever found the courage to tell this whole truth. For the women of Factory Number 7, whose suffering built my empire. For MMA and Betty Sue and all the others, whose resilience rebuilds lives. For Katie Lynn, who loved me enough to destroy me. For my parents, who see Mary Beth when they look at me, not Madison. And for every girl who ever believed the lie of perfect lives performed for strangers, may you find your way back to yourself, however winding the path, however funded the journey. Outside, Valhalla slept its small-town sleep, cricket songs and distant trains and the quiet breathing of lives being lived without documentation. Somewhere, a girl was taking her first pill to stay thin for the camera. Somewhere, a woman was stitching a logo she'd never afford onto leather she'd never touch again. Somewhere, someone was crafting a caption to make their ordinary life seem extraordinary. And somewhere in South Carolina, Mary Beth Johnson slept without dreams, her story unfinished, but finally, at least partially, true. The dedication page remained unwritten, waiting for the day when all masks could fall and all truths could surface. But that day wasn't today. Today was just another step in the long walk back from Madison to Mary Beth, from performance to person, from influence to integrity. It wasn't enough. It was everything. It was human. And in the end, being human, flawed, complicated, partially honest human, was the only influence worth having. Thanks for listening to this powerful story. Subscribe for more stories about the surprising ways people change our lives for the better. See you in the next story.